So I can welcome us in. Sound good, Ian?
I love it, Wayne.
All right, welcome back to We Talk Tech, everybody. We got a fun episode today. We've got our favorite guest, Taylor Danielson, back with us, and he's going to be talking about a new device he's been using the last little while.
Taylor, please tell us about your JACO arm by Kinova Robotics.
All right, so I think the best way to start is to show. So let's pull out the arm. So I've got two arms already, but they're just there for aesthetics at this point. What is really doing all the hard work is this robot arm. So this is JACO. It is by Kinova Robotics, as Ian said. The design philosophy behind it is to allow people with upper body mobility limitations to do more. Eating, drinking, your personal care, brushing your hair, which you can see is a very important activity for me. Maybe not so much for Ian and Wayne, but for me, yeah. And all these activities of personal care.
Can you lift the arm up slightly?
In front of my face.
Yeah, exactly.
How's this, Ian?
So Taylor, what is the origin of JACO?
The origin of JACO comes from a man named Jacques Fauré, born in Montreal. Jacques was born with muscular dystrophy along with a few of his siblings. And he and his siblings were lifelong inventors and entrepreneurs. He founded Quebec's first wheelchair-accessible taxi service, which allowed people with disabilities to get out and take part in their communities. Later on in his life, Jacques could only move his thumb, and he still wanted a way to reach out and interact with the world. So with the help of his friends and family, he prototyped the first arm called the Manipulo. And this arm was built from parts found around the house, including a bicycle, like the wire used in brakes on a bicycle, barbecue tongs. I think a lamp was also part of it. So just whatever there was available. And he made this into a very crude robotic arm, but it served his purpose. And with this robotic arm, the first thing he did was go outside and pick a flower for his wife. So the first act of assistive robotics was an act of love. And I think that's a really important thing to look at when looking at this technology is the user's intentions are really all that matter. So later on, Jacques unfortunately did pass away. But his nephew, a very young Charles de Gure, was watching his uncle and learned a lot of how to be inventive. And so he took this creation, this idea, along with his college friend, Louis-Joseph Carrion-Lecoyer, and they built the first version of JACO. And together they founded Kinova Robotics, where they used JACO as their flagship device designed to allow people with mobility limitations to reach out and interact with the world.
Now, this is going to be quite the transition. So Jacques seems like a very smooth man, picking the flower as the first act with his arm. And I noticed that arm came out very smoothly as well. Now, how are you controlling that arm?
So the arm can be controlled by anybody in a power wheelchair. So it mounts onto the side rail of your chair, and it integrates directly with whatever control system you have. So I am using a joystick and one switch or button to control the arm. To deploy and stow, or ready and retracted as they're technically called, I press and hold my switch, which many of our members are going to be familiar with as a device that we provide to them. They're super useful and versatile. So I hold the switch, and it's going to fold up and tuck away right to my side. So I'm just pressing and holding the switch right now with my thumb, and away it goes. This positioning is all very, very, very customizable to meet your specific needs, your chair, how things are configured for you. So mine folds away quite nicely at my side, but maybe yours can be folded away a little bit differently. Again, I'm holding the button, and it's going to deploy to its ready position.
Well, that's cool. I thought it was fully controlled with your joystick. So when I saw you driving and the arm come up, I was a little bit confused, but that's a nice little feature, that button.
So Taylor, it looks very complex at first glance. How easy is it to use? What's the learning curve?
Well, I think it's going to depend on how confident you are in driving your powered chair. For me, I've been driving my chair for 24 years now with the joystick, so it's muscle memory. For me, I was able to take my first drink with JACO within my first hour. The learning curve is not something that should scare people off, because you'll get it.
Well, similar to a wheelchair, or you can fumble your way through it for the first couple days or weeks, and then after a few months or years, then you can practically drive it with your eyes closed.
Yeah, exactly. But don't do that.
But in terms of teaching it, you mentioned you can teach the buttons what to do and program where the arm goes. I also read that there's something called safe zones that you can program.
Some people, they might have poor control over their hands. Say if you had spastic cerebral palsy, you might not have full control of your hands, and the last thing you want is for you to have a spasm and to suddenly jerk the arm in a direction you don't want. So an optional feature which can be enabled is called the safe zone. And the safe zone is a custom-defined volume relative to the base of the robot arm, in which the robot arm either will not go or will go at a reduced speed. And this is completely customizable in terms of where the no-go zone is, where the slow zone is, and the speeds that it will be reduced to in those slow zones.
Cool. Is that all done through a computer then? Do you hook up a computer to it, or?
Yeah, so it's just a USB cable that plugs right into the back of it. There's a software which can be used to change so many settings. There's a setting to compensate for the spasms if you have spasms. So it's really, really configurable to meet your needs and your use case.
And how does it actually mount to the wheelchair? Like, what are all of the components involved?
So the arm is mountable in a variety of different ways, typically onto the seat rail that's found on most models of power chair, which is how mine is mounted. And there is an optional accessory called the lift arm, which I also have, which is part of the mounting mechanism. The lift arm allows me to raise and lower the base of JACO, which can be helpful for reaching things on the floor. And this is especially critical if you don't have power adjustable seating. But if you did not opt for the lift arm, there is some aluminum rails which can be mounted. It's kind of a whatever works, not to say it's haphazard, but when you're working with chairs, you find the parts that fit and you assemble it in a way and a position that's going to work for the user. So it's very specific to the individual and where it's mounted, but typically it's onto the seat rail that most chairs have.
Okay, I got a couple more questions about the mounting. This is very interesting to me. So when it's mounted and when it's down, does it make the chair wider?
The arm makes the chair wider in some situations, but not by much. Whoever's mounting your JACO will try as much as possible to keep it inwards. And I'm sure there's some pieces that you could assemble in some way to try and reduce that as much as possible. But
right.
Not much, but probably a little bit.
Right. And even an inch and two, like I'm sure it hasn't changed how you drive around your home.
I wouldn't say so. It is something I do need to be aware of, especially if it's deployed and in certain positions. I think I gave it its first scratch after about 48 hours because it was a narrow hotel doorway and I had a drink in my hands.
Okay, and my one last question about the mounting is, where is it getting its power from? Is it from the chair itself? Does it have a rechargeable battery?
So the arm is powered through the chair. So that's part of the integration with your control system. It's also going to draw power from your chair. Typically, it's going to draw about 10% of your chair's total power, but this is highly variable based on what kind of batteries your chair has, their age, and your usage. So if there's a day where you're using JACO a ton, it's going to drain more power. But most users say about 10% of their battery throughout the day. And I would agree with that. That's been my experience.
One last question for me before we get into the fun stuff. I know there's a display.
Not having fun yet.
Can you talk a little bit more about that?
There is a display which comes with the arm. This is the OLED display, and it shows the modes. There are 4 main modes. We have B1 is like lateral movement. So on the same plane, but around the environment. So left, right, forward, and back. We have our second movement mode, which is vertical. In addition to that, it also does wrist rotation. So the wrist can rotate 360 degrees. There is a third mode, which I know is Ian's favorite mode, and it's pretty cool. I think the best way to say this, or to describe this mode, is pointing. You point the fingers in different directions. So the center of the hand will stay in one place, and it kind of rotates around it. So this is really, I think it's the most, if there is a mode that's complicated, it's this one, because it takes a lot of learning to understand when it's appropriate or when it's a good idea to point your fingers in a different direction to grab something.
You kind of get lost when you're watching it. It's so interesting.
Yeah, it's very mesmerizing. See, it's just moving space. And then our last mode is fingers. Fingers, so there is 3 fingers on JACO, and you can move either all 3 at a time, or you can also move 2 fingers, these 2 fingers independently.
Is there a lot of pressure you can put on stuff? And do you have to be careful of what you're grabbing?
That would be cool if you could just pick up a glass and crush it just as an intimidation method. But no, JACO is designed to be very, very safe for the user and anyone around the user. So like I have a glass here, which I can pick up. And I have 0 concerns that it could like break the glass, even though it is glass. So whenever I'm picking something up, I just squeeze the fingers as tight as they will go, and it's never been a problem. The only situation where it could be a problem is if you have something which is malleable, like a plastic water bottle. Like you could squeeze that too much and it'd spurt out the top and spill all over you. So here we've got our cup, and there's no way for it to shatter a cup like this.
That's incredible. How much weight can the arm lift? For example, if you were picking up a bag of groceries.
The arm can lift 1.6 kilograms, or about 3.5 pounds. I don't think I did the conversion right, but 1.6 kilos. So probably not enough to lift a grocery bag, unfortunately. And again, I think this comes back to safety.
And speaking of that glass, you were just holding that glass, and you mentioned there was a drinking mode with the arm.
Right. So most people with JACO, they use straws, and honestly, I do too. But there is a special mode built into your JACO called drinking mode. And it does 2 motions simultaneously, which makes drinking more natural. So we've got our cup here. Let's just put this up here. Okay. So typically so to get into drinking mode, you're in the second mode, B2, which does vertical and wrist rotation. And when we go into drinking mode, so if you look, this is how it's tilting now. And then if we enable drinking mode, and I'm doing this by just long pressing on my switch for 1 second, and that's going to enable drinking mode. And what drinking mode does is it combines the wrist rotation and a lift at the same time, which is a more natural drinking motion. Right. So I use both. I use straws and drinking mode. Drinking mode works really well, and it's a clever little addition that makes it's quality of life improvement.
What about eating? How does somebody hold a utensil with JACO?
there is an accessory which comes with all models or with all JACOs called the utensil tool. So this is a really critical tool for working with anything that requires like fine motion. So the example that we're talking about right now is eating and utensils, but other people have used this tool to paint. I used it to carve a pumpkin. So I used it to hold my knife while carving, and I didn't let anybody get within like 2 meters of me while I had that knife in there because it was a bit scary. So this is the utensil holder. Just gonna get a little bit closer here. And as you can see, there is 2 grooves on the left and right side of it, which fit perfectly with JACO's fingers. But there is 2 slots, or there's 3 slots here. I think you might be able to just see it. And in there, you would insert a fork or a spoon to handle. And then there is, on the top of this device, there is some screws, some just thumb screws that you can turn. So you loosen those, insert your fork, your spoon, your knife, and you tighten them down. And then it holds it really, really steady and reliably. So this is great for eating or anything which has a handle which is difficult for JACO to hold, which is things that are typically requiring fine motor control. So your paint brushes, your carving tools if you're carving pumpkins. And then if you have something which is a little bit larger, there is this center hole right in the middle here, and that's for things that which don't fit into those smaller slots on the side. So there's some versatility to this tool, which is really nice.
So Taylor, I know so many people, including myself, are wondering, how do you obtain a JACO and how much do they cost?
Well, it's hard to say because it really depends on where you are. So the biggest market for JACO is in the United States. I don't know how many are in Canada, but I know that there's maybe 2 in British Columbia, maybe 3 if we include the demo unit. If you want a JACO, I think the best way to go about it is to fill out the contact form on Kinova's website, and they can arrange a demo and answer all of your specific questions about how you use it. How much JACO costs is again going to vary depending on where you are. But Kinova has many specialists who are great at their jobs in justifying this to the insurance companies, Veterans Affairs, and all these other agencies who may compensate or cover the cost of a JACO.
So they are a little bit expensive. Obviously, there's quite a lot that goes into them. But would you say, and I think I know the answer, but would you say your independence has increased because of the JACO?
I like many of our members, I do have care staff, but they're not here all the time. So much of life happens at your fingertips. And if you have an upper body limitation, things are out of your reach. But with JACO, they're back in reach. I can do things for myself. So before we started recording this episode, I went and made myself a cup of tea, which is not something I could do before. And then I arranged all my camera equipment by myself independently, just so I look good on camera. And I brushed my hair independently. I did all of this by myself, and it's hard to put into words how much of a difference it has made. But I think if you asked any non-disabled person how much their arm is worth to them, it would be millions of dollars. Yes, JACO is expensive. They'd probably actually say it's priceless, right? I hope the governments of the world realize that much how a power chair is deemed a medical necessity for your mobility, your lower limbs, this device should also be a medical necessity because of the incredible difference it can make just on a person's general well-being. But I think from a financial perspective, it also is going to be a net positive to any organizations that are funding care, because I can do so much more for myself now. If anybody has any further questions about JACO, you can shoot me an email, or there is a contact form on the Kinova website, which you can fill out if you wanted to request a demo.
I had a similar experience testing out a demo unit. Very, very positive, easy to learn to use, just a wonderful device. I was very impressed. So thank you again for sharing.
You're welcome.
And as always, like, subscribe, and if you have any questions, please send us an email. See you next time.